I'm afraid your presence would lower the standard of the participants. Those words hung in the air like toxic smoke, while I stood frozen at the threshold of his office. My professional smile remained fixed, but inside, something shattered. My name is Ellie Dawson, a marketing strategist at a mid-sized advertising agency called Lumen & Finch. But there's one thing no one here knows. I am the daughter of Gregory Dawson, the mogul of the luxury resort industry, owner of the famous Dawson Archipelago Resort System, a chain of private islands where tycoons and politicians from around the world seek refuge from public scrutiny. And the person who just rejected me was Grant Keller, the self-important CEO of Lumen & Finch. He leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled smugly, as if savoring every word he spoke. I just don't think you meet executive standards, Ellie. Grant emphasized that the company's exclusive retreat at the Dawson Isle Resort was only for those who demonstrated true leadership qualities. His gaze quickly swept over my simple dark blue suit, not the kind he was used to seeing at his whiskey parties. How ironic. Dawson Isle, where I first went diving, where I helped staff fold towels as a child, was the place he deemed me not worthy to set foot on. I replied in a calm voice, "I understand. Thank you for clarifying." But inside, my heart pounded so hard it drowned out the hum of the air conditioning in the room. 3 years ago, instead of joining the Dawson Resort conglomerate as expected, I chose to start from scratch an unremarkable position at Lumen & Finch. I wanted to see what I could achieve without the Dawson name. No mansion, no luxury car. I lived in a small apartment in suburban Chicago, drove an old sedan, wore basic clothes, all by choice, not out of necessity. But to Grant, my lack of ostentation implied incompetence. Recently, I found myself increasingly marginalized. Campaign ideas I planned were presented by my superiors as their own. I was accidentally excluded from important deal-closing meetings. And now, I was officially cut from the retreat list. I returned to my desk, just as an email from our new client director, Vanessa Layton, popped up on my screen. "Ellie, drop by my office at 4. Want to discuss the Apex campaign. Great work. VL." The email was like water in a desert. Vanessa was the only person here who openly acknowledged my abilities. And I knew, if Grant ever found out I had any influence from her, he would immediately try to neutralize it. I opened my phone, my fingers scrolling to a number I rarely used. "Dad, we need to talk. About the company retreat on the island next week. I need a favor." My dad didn't call back right after the message. That wasn't unusual. He might be in a meeting with the corporate executive board, or enjoying his afternoon swim in the private bay beside his main villa in Santa Lucia. I was used to him not responding immediately. Running a global resort empire was never light work. So, I folded my phone and continued to tackle the pile of Henderson campaign documents that Grant deliberately asked me to redo, even though they had been approved by the client last week. A familiar trick to keep me busy, with no time to react or prepare for anything more important. The next morning, as I arrived at the office at 7:30, an hour earlier than most people, my phone lit up with a message. Very interesting timing. Someone at Lumen specifically chose Dawson Isle for this retreat. Call Dad after the company-wide meeting. I shivered slightly. Company-wide meeting? I hadn't mentioned that to him. But with Gregory Dawson, who always thought 3 steps ahead and had unimaginably deep connections across every layer of the business, his foreknowledge was not surprising. It was terrifying. 9:55 a.m., the glass conference room began to fill up. I chose a seat in the middle row, close enough not to be considered absent, but far enough not to draw too much attention. Grant stood at the front, barely concealing his excitement. His assistant, Amber, was arranging sand-colored gift bags on a nearby table. "Good morning, everyone." Grant began enthusiastically. "Before we get into departmental updates, I have a very special announcement." The projector displayed an aerial photo of a lush green island, with a villa perched across a hill, overlooking a pristine white beach. My heart almost stopped. I recognized that angle. I had personally approved that set of photos for Dawson Isle's marketing brochure 3 years ago. Dear colleagues, to honor Lumen & Finch's excellent Q3 results, our top-performing individuals will attend a 4-day retreat at the prestigious Dawson Isle Resort. The room erupted in gasps. To outsiders, it was an untouchable paradise, a place that required guest lists, national-level security checks, and appeared more often in quiet political negotiations than in the press. I remained still, my expression neutral, but my mind was spinning. "We'll be staying in private villas, not standard hotel rooms," Grant said triumphantly. "This place is a top choice for the ultra-rich, from A-list actors to leading tech CEOs." I quickly glanced at the slide with the participant list, then immediately looked again. My name wasn't there. Again. The list included all department heads, the executive team, and some mid-level staff, many of whom were clearly Grant's pets. But I, Ellie Dawson, who was leading the strategic Apex Technologies project, was completely absent. Grant briefly glanced my way. There was a faint smile at the corner of his lips before he flipped to the next slide. I waited for the meeting to end, waited for everyone to collect their tropical gift bags. Then I stood up and walked to Grant's office. "Do you have a few minutes to talk about the upcoming retreat?" I asked, keeping my voice gentle, perfectly polite. "Ellie, of course," Grant said, feigning cordiality. But he didn't close the door. A small detail, and very deliberate. "I noticed my name wasn't on the retreat list," I began. "Given that I'm leading the Apex project, the biggest project this quarter, and exceeding targets by 22%, I wanted to ask if there might have been a mistake." The smile on Grant's face faded. He leaned back in his chair, shifting to his familiar tone, the tone of a man who criticizes without leaving evidence. "No mistake, Ellie. This retreat is only for those who demonstrate true executive vision. I'm afraid your presence might lower the team's standards." Each word was uttered like a precisely sharpened knife. "You're capable, but your style isn't quite there. You dress too simply. You lack the necessary aura when working with high-level clients." I felt my throat dry, but kept my gaze steady and my voice calm. "Thanks for the feedback. Is there anything I should focus on while you're away?" Grant waved his hand as if dismissing something trivial. "The Henderson campaign, and start brainstorming ideas for the Wilson retail holiday season. Tyler will handle the direction when we return." I nodded, leaving his office to the silence of colleagues who were pretending to work. I opened my phone. "Dad, change of plans. I want to host them, but my way." My small apartment that day suddenly felt unusually cramped, as if the four walls were tightening with each simmering layer of emotion. I tossed my navy blazer, deemed unclassy, onto the chair, then poured myself some 30-year-old Glenrothes whiskey that Dad had sent me for Christmas. The only luxury I kept, but only drank when I truly needed to remind myself who I was. That night, the phone rang. It was my dad. "Ellie," his voice was deep and sharp as always. "Why are you mentioning the retreat? You always said you wanted to keep work separate from family." I sighed, slumping onto the sofa. "That was the plan, until my boss decided to exclude me from a retreat at our own family resort because I wasn't classy enough." The silence on the other end of the line stretched on. I pictured his gaze, narrowed, colder than Arctic winds, a look that could make an entire executive board tremble. "I'll handle him. One call. He won't just be out of the retreat, but out of a job." "Number." I sat up straight. "Precisely because I've spent 3 years proving myself without you. If you step in now, all that effort would be meaningless." Another pause. "So what are you going to do?" he asked. "I want them to come to the island. Everyone. Let everything go as planned. But I want Carlos, the resort manager, to know in advance that I'm coming." "And Dad," I smiled, "I need the presidential villa, and everything has to be perfect. I'm going to turn the tables." Dad laughed. "The villa you used to sketch in your final year of college? The one that cost 25,000 USD a night? That's the one. All right. Carlos will prepare, and I won't breathe a word to anyone." "Thank you, Dad," I said softly. For the first time in days, I felt relieved. After the call, I opened my laptop and began compiling all the evidence of Grant's discrimination and bullying. Emails, excluded meeting invitations, stolen campaign drafts, project reassignments. Every line, every denial, I didn't miss a single detail. I wasn't going to quit. Not now. I wanted him to see the value he had rejected, on my own turf. The entire next week, I maintained a completely calm demeanor. Grant started openly mocking me more. Ellie, what do you think we should do on the first day on the island, snorkeling or kayaking? Oh, right. You don't need to worry, because you won't be there. I smiled. I hope you all have a memorable experience. My calmness visibly annoyed him. By midweek, I was assigned 4 additional urgent projects, with deadlines immediately after the retreat ended. Worse still was Vanessa. The person who had shown me support was now completely silent. Twice I caught her changing direction when she saw me in the hallway. When I tried to talk about the Apex campaign, she cut me off. Email it. I'll look at it after the retreat. Didn't you used to want to be directly involved in Apex? I have other priorities now. Grant thinks it should be assigned to someone with more executive presence. I understood, and said nothing more. Friday morning, the office buzzed like a holiday season. Straw hats, sunglasses, maxi dresses, laughter and chatter about Dawson Paradise filled the air. Not a single person stopped to greet me. I quietly confirmed the details via text with Carlos. The presidential villa had been cleaned and prepared, exactly according to the design I had sketched. Subtle details, embroidered towels, white orchids, a special menu. Everything executed perfectly. That evening, I received an encrypted email from my dad. Attached were high-quality photos of the villa after its most recent renovation. Each bedroom represented a location within the Dawson hotel system worldwide. 6-meter-high glass windows, an infinity pool right on the beach, and even a hidden reading room behind a bookshelf, where I used to skip class to read Russian literature. I scrolled through each photo, imagining Grant's face when he stepped into the villa he thought I wasn't worthy of. I closed my laptop, quietly packed my bags. Not for the commercial flight with the Lumen Group, but for my dad's private jet, departing 3 hours earlier. The next morning, the sky seemed to be perfectly set for a movie. Clear, gentle breeze, bright sunshine. The Dawson family's private jet was parked on the private runway, gleaming like a silver arrow ready to pierce the sky. For the first time in 3 years, I was no longer hiding my last name. Welcome back, Miss Dawson. Diane, the longtime flight attendant, greeted me with a familiar smile. It's wonderful to see you again. Thank you, Diane. How's your daughter at MIT? Her eyes lit up. She's interning at a design studio in Tokyo this summer. I didn't think you'd remember. I don't forget those I value, I smiled. The 3-hour flight passed smoothly. I wasn't wearing my usual Lumen office attire, but a simple white linen dress, gold-plated sandals from a small designer in Florence, and my mother's sapphire necklace, its blue matching the Dawson Archipelago logo. No need for fanfare, just authentic. When the plane landed on the private runway on Dawson Isle, Carlos Mendez, the resort's legendary manager, was waiting, his smile brighter than the Caribbean sun. Little Ellie. He hugged me like a long-lost family member. But not little anymore. Your dad told me to prepare for a truly spectacular reversal of fortune. I laughed. I don't want revenge, Carlos. I want to reset the standard. He nodded. Understandable. But I have to admit your dad was a bit disappointed. You didn't let me throw your boss's suitcase into the ocean. We both burst out laughing. Carlos and I sat in the main villa lobby, meticulously discussing every detail. Grant would be welcomed as a special guest, until he discovered that the girl excluded from the retreat was the owner's daughter. I showed him photos of the staff for identification, explained relationships, and gave the most important request. I don't want anyone to be fired. No need to humiliate them. Just enough to remind them that true class isn't about designer suits or fabricated stories. Carlos nodded seriously. 1:30 p.m. I was ready in the grand hall, with its nearly 6-meter high vaulted wooden architecture, hidden behind a cluster of white orchids and large palm leaves. From that vantage point, I could observe the entire hall without being noticed. 2:07 p.m. The glass sliding doors opened. The Lumen and Finch group poured in like tourists fresh off a plane. Grant Keller led the way, sunglasses perched on his head, Hawaiian shirt still neatly folded, grinning as if leading a VIP tour. This, my friends, he spread his arms, is true paradise. I once chatted with Gregory Dawson in Aspen last year. We discussed brand strategy while having cocktails by the lake. I almost laughed out loud. My dad hadn't set foot in Aspen since 2017. Grant continued to spin tales. Jennifer Lawrence once stayed in this very villa. She and I discussed skincare serums while sitting by the infinity pool. The only person who had ever sat by that infinity pool with Jennifer was me. Carlos approached the group with impeccable poise, gentle yet authoritative. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I am Carlos Mendez, Executive Manager of Dawson Isle Resort. We are delighted to host the Lumen and Finch team. Grant stepped forward to shake hands, full of confidence. I'm Grant Keller, President of Lumen. My assistant must have confirmed the booking of the beachfront villas? Carlos smiled mysteriously. Actually, there's been a significant change in plans. You've all been upgraded to the presidential villa, thanks to a special someone. Grant frowned. Who? Carlos turned. My eyes met his. It was time. Please welcome Miss Ellie Dawson. I stepped out from behind the flowers, everyone's gaze simultaneously turning towards me. Absolute silence fell. Carlos hugged me once more, his voice loud enough for the entire hall to hear. Welcome back. Your father called directly to ensure everything was exactly to your liking. I smiled. Thank you, Carlos. It feels like coming home. Grant Keller was petrified. His face was ashen, as if all the blood had drained from it. Ellie, he stammered. His gaze panicked. You're a Dawson? I turned, a polite smile on my face. Surprised, Grant? He took a step back, bumping lightly into the reception desk. An employee had to steady him. Carlos didn't miss a beat. Please proceed to the presidential villa that Miss Dawson specially reserved for your company. I walked side by side with Carlos, my head held high. As I passed Grant, I whispered just loud enough for him to hear. Don't worry. I won't drag down the standard of this retreat. I'm just raising it back to where it should be. We left the main lobby in luxury electric cars, winding through palm-lined roads. Familiar paths I used to walk barefoot as a child now became the hallways of a play whose actors were completely unaware they were performing. The coconut tree on the left is bearing beautiful fruit, I turned to Carlos, pointing. Maria's team took such good care of it this year. She'll be very happy you noticed, Carlos replied. You still remember the native ecosystem restoration project when you were 15? You and she drafted the first plans together. Behind me, I heard a soft gasp from Lisa, the HR director, who was in the same car. Her surprise was evident as she realized. What I said wasn't boasting, but a genuine memory. I spoke louder, just enough for those around to hear. My dad finally agreed to build the meditation area on the eastern edge of the island. I suggested that location to catch the morning sun as a starting point for guests' mornings. Our architect still quotes your graduation thesis, Carlos added gently, about integrating native nature into resort spaces. I knew they were listening, and I wanted them to listen. When the convoy stopped in front of the presidential villa, all eyes practically exploded. The villa stretched out onto a rocky outcrop, with 3 sides facing the sea, and an infinity pool that seemed to seamlessly merge with the ocean. Soaring glass facades, a reception hall paved with solid stone, interiors of native redwood. Everything surpassed any imagination of a luxury resort. A line of reception staff stood in uniform white, a VIP welcome ceremony reserved only for heads of state or high-ranking billionaires. Welcome everyone to your home for the next 4 days, Carlos announced. Miss Dawson has specially arranged for the villa to be exclusively for the Lumen and Finch team. Gasps were heard everywhere. Carlos, I'll help with room assignments, I said softly, taking the tablet from his hand. Carlos nodded. His lips pressed slightly, as if trying to hide a mischievous smile. I looked at the group, maintaining a gentle tone, but the authority in it was unmistakable. I have chosen each room based on individual characteristics and preferences. I started from the bottom up. Lisa and Amber, you two will be in the Ocean Master Suites. That one faces directly out to sea, has a hand-carved stone tub, and a balcony that gets the earliest sun. Lisa was speechless. Amber, Grant's assistant had wide eyes. Both clearly hadn't expected to be chosen for 2 rooms, usually reserved for CEOs and their wives. Tyler and Devon, coral suites, with private pools near the spa and gym. And so, I consecutively assigned the best rooms to the mid-level staff, those who had treated me kindly, without judging my status. Even though they didn't know who I was, Grant started to sweat. Margot, the associate client director, also changed color. When I called her name, I assigned her to one of the smaller rooms, still luxurious amenities, but no longer at the top of the pyramid. Only, Grant remained. I looked up at him, smiled politely. And Grant Keller, Garden Suite. Cool, private, located behind the villa, facing the technical service area. No ocean view, no balcony, no marble bathroom. That room was designed for the accompanying butler of VIP guests. Staff will take everyone to their rooms, I said, as calmly as if guiding guests to a spa. Grant, pale-faced, shuffled towards the side entrance. No one dared to speak. No one dared to intervene. That evening, the welcome party took place on the main terrace, overlooking a spectacular sunset over the ocean. I wore a blue silk dress, matching the iconic color of Dawson Resort. Effortlessly, I was the center of attention. The 7-course meal was prepared by Chef Marco himself, who taught me to cook when I was 12. I noticed the bewildered expressions on my colleagues' faces as I discussed Rhone grape varietals with the sommelier, or made subtle comments on the herb-infused sauce of the swordfish. Not showing off, but natural, because this was the world I grew up in. Across the table, Grant could only stare down at his plate, his fork and knife unsteady. From the man who once called the shots in the office, he now didn't know where to place himself. And that's when I realized I no longer had to beg to be in the room of power. I was that room. I was chatting with Carlos on the patio about tomorrow's schedule when his gaze briefly shifted behind me. Then he nodded with a look of both surprise and satisfaction. "Looks like we have an uninvited guest," he said softly. I turned. My father, Gregory Dawson, was entering the grand hall. The midday sun reflected on his silver hair, his posture still as steady as a man who once commanded the world, but today, he wasn't here to talk to partners. "Dad?" I was slightly surprised. "We agreed you wouldn't show up." "I know," he smiled. "But I heard some people still don't understand who you are. I thought I'd come see for myself." He hugged me gently, then shook Carlos's hand. The atmosphere immediately changed. Eyes that were picking at the fruit buffet suddenly froze. Though few had seen him in person, anyone in the luxury hospitality industry knew Gregory Dawson, a man for whom even Arabian princes waited for appointments. Grant saw him first. His face went white. "Welcome, everyone," my dad said loudly, his voice calm but sharp. "I hope Lumen and Finch is enjoying their unworthy retreat at Dawson Island." I subtly winced. "Dad." He looked at me, silent for a few seconds, then turned to the crowd. "I hear this villa has excellent audio recording. Yesterday, my technical system accidentally overheard a few comments about the participants' standards." Grant swallowed hard. It was a direct but veiled jab. Even though my dad completely made it up, there were no hidden microphones here. Grant would never dare to verify. After breakfast, as everyone prepared for outdoor activities, I carried a thick folder and walked over to Grant, who was sitting quietly by the edge of the sand. I stood beside him, looking out at the sea. "Beautiful, isn't it?" I said softly. He didn't answer. I handed him the folder. "This is for you." He took it, opening it. Inside was a detailed compilation of all the evidence of my 3 years of suppression. Emails, excluded meeting invitations, stolen campaigns, reassignments, vague comments about my appearance, clothing, and lack of executive presence. I said nothing. I let the silence burn. After a few minutes, Grant looked up, his face drained of all color. "You're going to give it to the board?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "I could," I said truthfully. "Or give it to the media." He closed his eyes. You're going to destroy me?" "Number." I looked him straight in the eye. "I don't need to destroy you. I want you to change." Grant's eyes widened. You will be required to participate in unconscious bias training, reform the promotion process, clarify promotion criteria, and you will publicly endorse these changes. If I refuse, then everything in this folder will no longer be private. I remained silent, letting the ocean waves say the rest. Grant looked at me for a long time. Why? He said softly. Why would you let me off the hook? I took a deep breath, because taking down one person doesn't change the system. But redefining how a person in power behaves, that can change everything. That evening, I stood on the beach, torchlight reflecting on the water. The retreat farewell party was cozy, not ostentatious. I stepped forward, raising my glass. 3 years ago, I chose to hide the Dawson name to build my own path, I began. I didn't want to succeed because of the name, but because of my ability. But I also learned something. Privilege doesn't disappear just because you try not to use it. I looked around. There were looks of gratitude. There was also shame. We need to change how the system perceives value, not based on expensive suits or connections with leaders, but on ideas, effort, and character. I announced the changes that would be implemented at Lumen and Finch, transparent promotion policies, and the Dawson Foundation internship program for students without family connections or financial backgrounds. The entire beach applauded. For truth, for the future. 6 months later, I sat in the new president's office at Lumen and Finch, the office that used to be Grant's. He had resigned for health reasons right after the retreat. I hadn't changed my style. Still a minimalist gray blazer, my desk only had a laptop, a ceramic coffee cup, and a piece of coral in a glass frame. Beside it was a photo. My dad and I, standing among the first group of Dawson Foundation interns. The intercom buzzed. Miss Dawson, call from Mr. Gregory. He wants to discuss next year's retreat. I smiled, picking up the phone. I was just thinking about you, Dad.